Hi, it's a pretty quiet weekly roundup this week, but there's still some cool stuff. And yes, I need another haircut. Don't I? Before we get stuck into the video, I thought I'd mention something really cool besides my hairstyle. A while back, YouTube stopped supporting annotations in videos. That wasn't cool. This was a real pain in the neck for me and also you, because I lost the ability to be able to provide annotation links as the video progressed. So I wrote a simple WordPress plugin for my website that provides all the missing annotations and allows you to skip forwards and backwards through the video. It's only in beta at the moment, so let me know if you come across any issues. But you're going to love it. Crowdsourcing sites are pretty quiet at the moment. You can almost hear the crickets. At first glance, the Retro Stone looked like just another gaming case wrapped around an ordinary Pi 3. However, it's a custom SBC running an Allwinner H3 with 1GB DDR3 RAM, USB ports, 100 megabit Ethernet, SD, HDMI, all the usual stuff you might find on an SBC, but also has speaker connectors, LiPo management, power switch, LCD driver IC and onboard buttons and vias, providing a bunch of GPIOs. It also supports Energy Square wireless charging, which is a much cheaper way of charging portable devices. Seems to tick all the boxes for portable gaming. And Sodec have just published their 5th campaign on Kickstarter with a bunch of new IoT specific boards. 3 boards are based on the Arduino form factor and provide a mix of GPS, LTE-M, 2G and NB-IoT, and another 3 with the same lineup mix but smaller. All of the boards are based on the well-known u-blox modules and come with LiPo battery management and a SAM-D21 core. This next Kickstarter just might be too late in the game, considering you can get high-quality PCBs made very cheaply these days. However, there might be a niche market here for people wanting ultra-fast PCB turnaround. It's essentially an ink printer that can be used as an etching mask for PCBs with a resolution of 8 mils. Great idea, but once again the hassle and mess of DIY PCBs and the price tag of $1,000 US, you would have to be desperate. We've seen a couple of these keyboard ideas in the past, most of them aimed at a consumer market, but this one aims for the maker. It's essentially a 6x6 capacitive touch grid running an Atmega 32U4 providing the USB HID functionality. You can reprogram using the Arduino IDE and print out special overlays allowing you to change the function of each button. Cool. And then there's Indiegogo. Okay. Over at Crowd Supply there's another Nixie Tube clock in pre-launch called the Nixie Tap. Runs off an ESP8266 syncing to an internet clock source with a capacitive touch sensor for control contained in a steampunk style walnut case. Looks pretty good. Over at GroupGets there's a group buy for a remote presence sensor, runs a SAM-D21 MCU, SD for logging, u-blox SARA module for cellular connectivity and PIR motion sensor. It's housed in an IP67 rated enclosure so it can live outdoors without issue. Now this is something to get excited about. If you're in Nuremberg, Germany next week, I'd suggest checking out Embedded World 2018, where you'll see the latest in cool embedded stuff like the ST Micro Discovery Kit and a whole bunch of other stuff. Hopefully there won't be any power outages. Technologic Systems have created a new low-powered SBC based on the IMX6 Ultralight SoC with 1GB RAM, 4GB eMMC, SD slot, dual 100 megabit Ethernet and USB. All the usual stuff you see on an SBC, but this one also packs in a Lattice Semiconductor Mark X02 FPGA with 62 accessible GPIOs. They have also added in an open source based ZPU soft core, allowing you to easily offload tasks to the FPGA using a typical GCC based build chain. The board also has a header designed to connect into this baseboard, giving you gigabit Ethernet, M2 SATA and a whole lot more GPIOs. Emtreon is jumping on the SBC bandwagon with a new board based on the dual-core Renesas SoC. Comes with 2GB RAM, 64GB eMMC, CAN transceiver, RTC and unusually 5GB Ethernet ports. The unusually named Nutus company have a small SBC aimed at pro makers to be shipped in April. The tiny 42mm by 30mm board contains the quad-core Allwinner H5, with 512 meg RAM, 8 gig eMMC, HDMI, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, onboard crypto chip, and 38 GPIOs pushed out, running off a 3.3 volt DC supply. What makes it a ProMaker SBC is the fact that it's a module that plugs into a baseboard. Still pretty good for around $49 US. STMicro will be releasing a new MCU targeting wireless communications in competition with Espressif's ESP32. The new chip will have 256KB RAM, 1MB flash, and support for USB, audio, LCD, up to 72 GPIOs, embedded crypto engine, Bluetooth 5 with mesh support, and also an 802.15.5 radio that provides OpenThread, Zigbee, and other protocols. Looks like a promising chip. The SAM A5D2 from Microchip is a system in package running a 500 MHz Cortex-A5 with onboard 128 MB RAM and other cool features allowing you to run mainline Linux in the same way as the MediaTek SIPs. Microchip have now released a cheap $39 US module with this SIP at the core, as well as a PMIC, 64 megabit SPI flash, 2 kilobit EEPROM, 100 megabit Ethernet transceiver, and all the GPIOs broken out. Looks really good. So after being scoffed at for years, the Raspberry Pi is finally being seen as a platform of choice in areas where traditionally you would have seen products selling for 10 times the price. A good example of this is the BassPi from a building automation company. It's a Pi hat with BACnet comms allowing control over AC equipment, lighting, elevators, and other things you'd find in a building. It has 12 BACnet points with another 24 virtual points and a Sedona virtual machine. If you're into cheap building management devices, this one will probably excite you. There's a number of embedded OSs around. Most of you would have heard about FreeRTOS, Contiki, Mbed, Nutix, and at least a couple of others on this list. One that isn't on here is TOC-OS. This one claims to be extensible, reliable, and low powered. The core is written in Rust and contains all the usual RTOS lineup, but there's also the concept of capsules, which are sort of like kernel modules, but run cooperatively, as well as user space processors, which run preemptively. MCU support is minimal at the moment, with only the Atmel SAM4L and Nordic nRF52 MCUs supported, but still looks pretty promising. This next one will interest a couple of my patrons. Particle have released 3 new modules designed for mesh networks. The Particle Xenon runs an nRF52840 MCU supporting Bluetooth 5 mesh networks, while the Particle Boron with an nRF52840 as well as a u-blox LTE-M module, and the Particle Argon with nRF52 as well as an ESP32. All the boards are otherwise identical with 20 GPIOs, 2 MB SPI flash, USB, JTAG, and LiPo battery management. If you look at them closer, you'll see they are also identical to Adafruit's Feather. ARM is jumping on the AI bandwagon with an announcement of their ARM ML and OD processors. The ML is short for machine learning and OD for object detection. These processors will allow you to detect objects in complicated orientations at 1080p at up to 60 frames per second. They are also claiming to play nice with other neural network software like TensorFlow and CAF by providing a translation stack called ARM-NN without any code modification required. Looks promising. And over at Tindy, it's unusually quiet as well. If you've ever been hacking around with your own OBD software, you'll know how much of a pain it is to develop. I found myself on several occasions stuck out in the car coding away late at night. One way to avoid this is to get one of these OBD simulators. It's a little expensive, but worth it. Trust me. Another one from Dave Darko Industries called the Lameboy. It's a Game Boy style DIY kit running an ESP8266, SD slot, RGB backlit Nokia LCD screen, and a couple of buttons to mash. And Dave, I expect a snazzy trailer video for this one. This next one is another nRF52832 based board, but it's the smallest I've seen so far, measuring only 10mm by 7mm with 30 GPIOs pushed out. Nice. In need of controlling a bucket load of servos, this board has 2 PCA 9685 PWM drivers, giving you control over 32 servos. It also has a 5V DC buck converter, allowing a DC input from 6 to 28 volts. reverse polarity protection, and MOSFET controlled servo power. One of the limitations of some USB SDRs is the small tuning range. This board will allow you to increase the range to 10 kHz all the way through to 1.7 GHz. Of course, you'll need to be using the correct antenna for the different frequencies. If you have ever bulk programmed a lot of boards, then you'll know all about pogo pins. This one is about the right size to hold and also has a reset button to make programming and testing so much easier. Over at Adafruit, they have their RGB Matrix Pi bonnet. This makes it easier to interface to these 64 by 64 RGB LED displays. This is certainly a much easier way to do it than my bit bashing that I use for my Christmas tree game. While over at SparkFun, they have the Wallabot starter in. What's a Wallabot starter? I'm glad you asked. It's a board that has a 3 antenna array that acts as a 2-dimensional radar. This allows you to detect breathing movements, tracking objects both visible and behind a wall. They have an API supporting Windows, Linux and Raspberry Pi. This is an unusual and pretty cool little device. The BNO080 is a pretty interesting IMU. Not only does it have an onboard accelerometer, gyro and magnometer, but packs in a Cortex M0 allowing you to generate fusion data and other complex algorithms such as activity classification. Over at Newark, they have the Cloud IO Pi Hat, which comes from the India-based Grasp IO company. It's a fairly simple board giving you temperature and light sensors, buzzer, OLED and buttons, but they also provide a cloud service based off IFTTT with a simple drag and drop programming interface. Over at DigiKey, they are selling 3 new Renesas boards. All 3 boards have either an RX65N, RX130 or RX231 as the core MCU, and then contains 2 50-pin headers with most of the GPIOs broken out, USB, PMOD connector and a couple of user buttons. Pretty decent board for only $28 US. Over at Pi Moroni, they have their simple DC buck converter Pi Shim, which allows you to power your Pi from a 3 to 16 volt DC input. Great for in-vehicle use. And over at... Hey, is that all? Oh. Don't forget you can always follow or subscribe to me on all the social networks, and I have to give a big thanks to all my patrons who support me on Patreon and directly. Your support means a lot to me, and there's a bunch of you who have been around for a long time keeping this channel going. It's a lot of hard work running a YouTube channel, and my goal has always been to educate and entertain. So if you like my content and would like to see more of it, then I and all my other supporters would be glad to see you stick around. So thanks for watching, and see you next week.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.